Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. Please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Mark Smith, who is the president of Kitewheel. He's also a friend of the podcast because he was back on the podcast, or he was on the podcast rather, back in October 2017, and we were talking about it just before we went live, and it's like, oh my god, 3.5 years ago, and time has flown. So Mark, welcome back. I know I've got a few more kind of gray hairs. I don't know about you, but it's great to speak to you again.
Yeah, it's really great to be here again, Adrian. Thanks for inviting me, and I can confirm there's a few more gray hairs since 2017. That's for sure.
So just as a bit of a refresher, and just for the people that are not familiar with yourself and the work that you do, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, also the work that you do, and what Kitewheel's all about, and what's sort of happened since we last spoke?
Yes, for sure, Adrian. So, as you said, I'm the president at Kitewheel, which is a technology business based here in Boston, in the US. We set the company up about just over 8 years ago, and we're focused on helping businesses manage customer journeys. And what's I think really interesting in terms of what's happened since we last spoke, or actually not since we last spoke, Adrian, but since I was last on the podcast, is the way so many businesses have suddenly become very focused on this concept of the customer journey and how to better manage it, because this kind of connection seems to have been made that it's managing the journey is going to help improve the experience for customers, because it's that journey, the way a business can help a customer move from channel to channel and move through time as they experience a brand, is the number one competitive differentiator, it seems these days, for so many different businesses. So we've actually, despite the tough times of the last year, given the whole pandemic and the impact it's had on so many people, in a weird way, it's kind of been good for us, because so many businesses have really got focused again on helping customers, because their customers are in a totally new situation in many cases, and need the help. And in a new world where we all spend a lot of time sitting at home doing our business from here, finding ways to smooth that experience and improve that experience is very, very popular. And so that's what Kitewheel does. I've been kind of in the space of analyzing and predicting customer behavior for about 20 plus years. But Kitewheel is kind of bringing that to life as a solution for businesses to help them, use that insight into the behavior of customers to build better engagement processes, and run them, make them real. Move on from a journey map as a theoretical picture of what a customer journey is, to a customer journey being a real engagement that happens across channels, and the business is actually engaged, kind of running it and making it a real thing for the customer.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, now, because I want to dig into that a little bit, because you'd actually describe yourselves as a cloud software platform for customer journey orchestration. Now, I know journey orchestration has been around for a while, but but I feel like the mindset of many kind of people, journey orchestration is also kind of quite a new sort of term, as it
Yeah.
were. So it's a rising up the agenda, as it were. So maybe you can explain to me what you mean by that, and sort of how that works, because it sounds like magic, Mark.
Oh yes. Well, there's definitely some secret sauce in there, should we say. And so, yeah, journey orchestration to us is as I was just saying, this process of automating and managing the customer experience through it being a journey that's defined in a piece of software. So our product, Kitewheel product, a cloud software platform, that just means we're running in the cloud. So no one has to sort of buy our software and install it on a computer anymore. You just kind of go in through a browser, and the software sits on various cloud servers, Amazon and Google servers around the world. And so you as a business just kind of connect in and use it through your browser. And what you do is you start by kind of mapping out an experience, perhaps, or you start by analyzing actual customer activity, what we would call journey analytics.
Right.
And a merger of that analytic process of understanding the behavior of customers with your planning process about the kind of experience you'd like to deliver to a customer. Those come together then as orchestration in terms of an automated process that tracks customers, sees them appearing on different channels, and ensures that the business does the right thing in a connected way, so that messages they hear are consistent across channels, actually tie in to what the customer's interested in, and are not just marketing push from the business, but are focused on understanding where the customer is, what they're trying to do, and help them get there, and help make it quick and easy, which is what we're all interested in.
And so is that kind of like more like so you're watching, you have an idea of kind of what you'd like to happen, you're actually watching what happens, and is that a sort of a more of an idea where you go, if say Joe, for example, does this, then do that, as it were, because based on their profile and their kind of their history.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes. Although it's usually somewhat more complex than if this and that.
Yes.
One of these, it's one of the if this and that, but
right.
not this, then maybe these two things, let's try, and learn which of these two might work as the next step.
Right.
It's more, so you move into this whole area of kind of a machine learning approach, where sometimes there are alternatives, and you actually kind of want to test and learn those on the fly. But even the upfront decisioning, typically we're involved when, it isn't just a simple question of if this, then that, but the business has got a whole bunch of data about a customer, tracked maybe going back through their history of potentially years of doing business with that organization.
Right.
And we use all of that insight to kind of figure out where you are on your journey and what's the right thing to do now. Not just, hey, the red shoes are on a special this week, let's tell Joe about the red shoes. But actually, Joe's favorite color is blue, and he's already bought 4 pairs of shoes. It's time to get him interested in some socks, right?
Yeah. And so that, I guess that's also going to facilitate the running of experiments and stuff as well. Like you said, well, it might be
That's
this
right.
or this. And so that facilitates also the learning.
Yeah. And anywhere where you've got data and automation, it's now possible to start that kind of learning process,
Mhm.
put in place tests and experiments to help the business learn. Now, what we always recommend is that for many cases, what the right thing to do is for a customer. If you've got this picture of them and you know where they are on a journey, you know what the right thing is to do. But there are absolutely cases where you don't, and that's where the best thing to do is run some experiments and kind of
Yeah,
learn what fits in this particular situation.
yeah. Because
But
I mean that.
you have to mix them, Adrian.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You don't want to always be experimenting, driving people crazy with irrelevant things just because you want to test. This customer's right in the middle of a complaint case or an insurance claim, and they're back on the phone. Don't start testing whether they're interested in some new products.
Yeah.
Answer their immediate needs first is always a good strategy.
Yeah, and sorry, yeah, I get that, and but I also want to go back to this. There is this idea that many brands are very kind of vocal, and brands and people and professionals and leaders are very vocal about this idea of having this putting their survey results, the voice of the customer kind of like data at the heart of what they do. But
Mhm.
I've always been concerned that that data is potentially partial
Mhm.
and potentially misleading. And I just wanted to kind of like to float that by you. I mean, am I right in that, or am I just being a bit of a skeptic and a cynic?
No, I'm totally with you on that. I mean, it's valuable insight, but it's definitely got a particular lens on it. It's coming from the customer, and there's all sorts of potential bias there in terms of the type of people who respond to those things. And many times, we've certainly had customers who are very interested in only asking certain types of customers certain questions, and
Yeah.
that can bias the results as well. And then you've got the whole problem about, is the customer really kind of know how to answer these questions properly, and not deliberately so, um, but they, what's in their mind as they answer, how happy are you, doesn't always connect with what they've actually done. And there's a great quote actually, which I love to use, from David Ogilvy, who's
Uh-huh.
one of the all-time masters of sales and marketing, who said, the trouble with market research is people, they don't think what they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. And so,
No, I know that one. It
yeah,
is a brilliant
yeah.
piece of insight.
So our whole approach there is you've got to go beyond just that. That the voice of customer is important,
Hmm.
but organizations have so much data available to them now that goes way beyond that voice of customer. That is what we call journey analytics. I think there's a total tie there between what some practitioners would call the voice of process.
Right.
So what's actually happening is what we call journey analytics. It's
Mm.
looking at all of that behavioral activity and figuring out what the customer's actually doing in a channel, but also through time across channels. And I think one of the big problems with surveys is you know, a survey gets used for a point in time and a particular channel, but
Hmm.
the answers the customer gives are probably to do with the bigger experience that they're going through.
Right.
And a poor customer service rep gets a bad score in a call center, but maybe it's because the customer's frustrated at what recently happened on the website. All right.
But I also think that there's also a thing around kind of when people respond to surveys. We know that sometimes survey response rates are not great,
Mm-hmm.
and we know that there's also a difference between what people say and what they do. But if we focus also on trying to map together the survey data, but also the analytic data in terms of what they actually do, the actual process operational sort of stuff, then you get more of a complete sort of picture, and it's not skewed towards people that are just responding to surveys,
Right.
which
Right.
as we all know, that most people uh, have a propensity to respond to surveys, are more likely to rather respond to surveys if either the thing has been great or not
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yeah,
And actually it misses out the big kind of middle, which is the majority of interactions in
right.
large part.
That's right. Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So I kind of like the kind of how that sort of how it's all kind of painting like this bigger kind of picture, and you're being able to figure out what's the next best thing to do, for that customer to orchestrate the optimal kind of journey for them. But that's all kind of like sounds very esoteric, obviously, Mark. And I always like to ask people to explain to me or to describe maybe a couple of examples of firms that are sort of adopting this approach, going down that journey analytics and journey orchestration kind of route,
Yeah.
and what they've done and how they've benefited, kind of more just to bring it all to life. So if you've got a couple that you can share with us, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, for sure, Adrian. So, um, actually, one of the first examples that we worked on in this area, and it was probably kicked off shortly after we spoke, or around the time that we last spoke, Adrian, with one of the largest power companies here in the States that we work with, was very focused on taking initially an analytic view of their customers' journeys, and got underway with us purely from the let's gather all our data and start piecing it together and seeing, we've obviously, that kind of business has got stacks of analytics already, reports from the website, reports from their email system, call centers. They're tracking channel by channel this stuff, but had never pieced it together. But they knew they had a problem. They'd got one area of the country, one whole region had a very and they've grown over the years. They're a sort of amalgamation of about 6 different power companies that had all been bought up. And one region had an incredibly poor onboarding performance, both in terms of successfully getting customers kind of digitally onboarded, and then customers always having to call and get help, and costly help from the organization. And at the same time, of course, poor customer satisfaction, poor NPS scores. And I'm a huge believer in these things tied together. I'm a huge believer in, making it easy and better for the customer should be a win-win, right?
Sure.
We totally saw that with this customer of ours, that they were able to use journey analytics to figure out where the problem was. So there's this key blocker that was happening at a part of that onboarding process, where essentially they had a system failure on their side, which is why it was only occurring in one region. There was, some connected to the data that the customer was being asked to input into this process, where it was all breaking down. But they had never pieced it together to see that was the failure point that was causing the problem.
Right.
And through journey analytics, they were able to pinpoint that and see that it was everybody got here as they were moving through this journey. This was the failure. They moved in. They were able to solve that in a couple of weeks in terms of fixing the error on their part. And all of a sudden, they were able to clear up something like 85% of the failed onboardings were resolved. And to their huge delight, and it's interesting, everybody in business is motivated and incented in different ways. The thing that really drove our customers was they on the next quarter's NPS scores, they had a 20-point increase in that region. So they'd actually saved a whole bunch of money because they didn't have to get their staff involved servicing this stuff. They got customers onboarded happy, and the customers were happier because it all happened for them much more smoothly. And so I thought that was a great example of this, the way the analytic process of identifying where the problem areas were as a journey, not just as a channel, was helping. And then another great example, which I like to share, is in the insurance industry, where we helped one of the largest insurance companies here in the States uncover kind of a self-inflicted problem. They
in large part.
Well, that's right, absolutely. And what they had no idea was just the scale to which they were causing their own issues. It's all down to them trying to do the right thing, sending information out to customers around claims and around payments. That they thought, best to share as much information as we can. And every time there's a payment being made or a claim being made, we're going to send out this communication. What they had never realized was those communications were a huge driver of first traffic to their website, where customers were searching for further info to explain what on earth this gobbledygook was that they got in this letter that they were having trouble processing because it was essentially too technically written.
Wow, you're telling me stories now, and it just makes me want to scream.
Yeah. So the customer goes to the website, tries to find answers to these questions, doesn't find them, so they call for help, and they call the call center, and so whilst they knew the traffic in each of these different channels and had been looking at that for years, until they brought it together as a journey analysis, they had never known that the way each of these three channels interplayed and the way their outbound communications drove traffic to the website. They could watch that traffic on the website, search for answers to certain questions, and then those people went straight through to call the call center and ask for further help because they were frustrated. They were then more frustrated because they couldn't find the right answer on the website and ended up coming into the call center already wound up and essentially bad experience all along the way. And what they'd never realized was how much they were responsible for creating that, because their own processes were pushing the customers down this route. And so just another example, kind of real example, Adrian, of the way these things get uncovered when you start to take this a journey perspective on your analysis.
Yeah, it's almost it feels like holding a mirror up to an organization in terms of the output that they produce across different sort of functions and
right.
stages and things. And
And
I'm honest with you, it does kind of make me want to scream some of these things.
Absolutely, and we all know it as well. We all experience it, don't we, in our own lives and our own interactions with many businesses. You get this sort of frustration that it could be better, and we know that businesses are trying to make it better. They're just stuck in the world of the systems they currently have, and I think many of them don't realize that there are now methodologies available and tools available to help take this different view that's focused on the customer and their overall experience rather than just channel by channel kind of reports, which is the world that most people are stuck in at the moment.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are two great examples of things that are, how would I describe them? They're probably quite familiar and possibly quite mundane in many ways, but are potentially easy to fix when you take this sort of approach, and it allows you to connect the dots a bit more and to smooth off some of the creases, as it were. I mean, so before you even get into anything fancy, as it were, I think that's the kind of thing. I think it was like I remember speaking to this to a guy who was previously a guest on the podcast. A brilliant guy, love him. He's called Jerry McGovern, an Irish fellow. And Jerry came up with this kind of quote. He says, and I'm not going to try and do an Irish accent because I'm rubbish at it. He basically said customer experience is primarily, or rather, he said a large part of customer experience, or the significant part of customer experience, is about sweeping and cleaning.
Right.
And I just thought that just made so much sense.
Right.
It's not about interior decoration. A lot of the time, it's just keeping things kind of like ship shape in many ways, which is exactly kind of what you're kind of like saying with the sort of the two examples. And it's just a way of actually trying to almost get in front of that, to understand it and to do kind of better by it.
That's right. So one of our golden rules that we use all the time when we get started with customers is stop doing stupid things. And it's so much of the problems that they'll have are that they're just doing the wrong thing, but they don't know it. This is why you've got to start with this analytic perspective, and the more you can overlay your voice of customer. That's going back to your point earlier. I mean, that's where this becomes really valuable. You can see all the patterns. You can now do journey analytics to see the patterns of behavior. But if you can then also overlay where in that journey the customer's happy or unhappy, That is really allows people to take a big leap forward. And so one of our big financial banking clients here described it as, for years we've been looking at this data, and for years we've known the who and the when of satisfaction, but we've never been able to make the next step and figure out the why. And because we didn't know the why, we couldn't really do anything about it. It was all just a, how's it changed this month then kind of approach. But by now being able to see the overall journey, they can see the points in the journey when the customer's unhappy, gives them a whole new level. They can see the things that led up to it, the things that maybe followed it, and now feel empowered to be able to understand the bigger picture and be able to do something, change the process, change the journey, so that the dissatisfaction goes away.
So I guess that kind of feels like the big lessons that can be learned kind of here is that actually that you have this data, you just need to assemble it, I guess, and learn from it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. The data's there. I mean, this is it. More so than ever, obviously.
Yeah.
Everything's being run by computers and systems these days. There's data everywhere in each of these channels. It's the magic. Going back to your reference earlier to the magic. The magic is how you piece together and link that data so that you can track the customer on their experience. And that's the secret sauce in many ways, because the data is absolutely there. Absolutely.
So, Mark, I was thinking about because you're in the thick of it, with a bunch of big clients and things, and in the midst of the journey orchestration sort of field. I mean, so I wanted to get your perspective on, where we're at right now, and what does the future of service and experience sort of look like, just as a way of sort of changing tack a little bit. And on top of that, kind of like, what do you think some of the key challenges are that lie ahead?
Yeah, so
I mean, that's a big question. I mean, we can just kind of warn people who might be here for days, but
yeah, it's quite. So in terms of the future, I mean, we are just seeing the first big organizations kind of getting the stuff I've just been talking about here, getting really started with journey analytics. It's a pretty new area. I feel like there's a 3-phase kind of maturity going on in the CX world, and the CX world, and I'm sure you've seen this, Adrian. I mean, it's changing dramatically. From there's been CX professionals for 15 years more, maybe. But I feel like those individuals, their job they're doing has massively risen over the last few years as CX has become not a low-level problem-solving, issue resolution thing, but has raised itself up in an organization as being kind of what the whole business is suddenly about, and it's a key differentiator. So CX is changing a lot, but the phases that we see organizations go through is there's the mapping stuff that kind of we need to just put our plans down and draw out what we think the journey should be or is for a customer. And it's quite theoretical, and lots of businesses have done that going back years. The phase 2 is this analytic phase of using the data in a smarter way, and that's where we see the first real movers are now very actively doing that. And it's been a big pickup in that in the last 12 months or so, I would say. Lots of formal procurements underway for that kind of approach. The future is the third step, which is this orchestration thing, the journey orchestration. That's what really comes on the back of a good analytic process, is then you can start doing things about it and put processes in place that automate a better experience for the customer. And some of the kind of really interesting stuff we see there is actually connecting the voice of customer and the feedback stuff into that orchestration. And I think that's that's going to be one of the hot areas for CX professionals in the future. Is the fact that that feedback channel can be used as another communication channel with the customer. That you just like organizations are trying to coordinate communications with customers and not over communicate. Same is true in the feedback area. We've had clients of ours realize that they're over surveying the same customers because they hit them. The good customers use lots of stuff and use lots of channels, so they end up getting lots of surveys. That should all be managed and orchestrated the same way as everything else. And then ultimately you can start using that survey capability in a much more intelligent way, that you move into kind of micro surveys that can help address some of the issues you were raising about, the bias of only very happy or very unhappy people answer. If you can get micro surveys served to a customer as part of the journey, becomes part of the experience, is asking them a quick question, checking in with them, checking that they're happy. Is everything okay? Did you like that bit of the experience? And moving to the feedback being almost more of a continuous sort of collection of little snippets of info that is carefully orchestrated as part of the overall experience. That's kind of best in class vision stuff for leading organizations.
I guess also, you take all of that and it's trying to, I guess, be open and transparent about all of that. So you bring it all into the one place so everybody really has access to it. So ultimately, if somebody gets on a chat or on email or on the phone or whatever, when somebody has a problem and they need to, they can't self-serve and they need to talk to somebody or be in touch with somebody, the person that they're talking to has access to all of that data, where they can say, oh, we've seen you done this and this, and you surveyed, we asked you about this, and you were like, well, that's okay, and so on and so forth. So you end up with that sort of very much a conversational approach. So rather than it being, I guess the challenge is that you've got to make that data available to people so people can see that full and rich picture of that interaction. And I guess that is ultimately the best in class.
Yes. Yeah. And what the thing I would add to that, Adrian, is when it comes to providing that data through to the customer service professionals who are having the live interactions with customers, there's you can't overload them. It's not a matter of just giving them access to everything. There's also a whole area of where kind of a decisioning and an orchestration solution helps to select out what the important things are and almost prioritize them, so that the agent gets kind of guided as well. And you can imagine, and again, the sort of leaders are thinking about the journey for their own people and how that lines up with an orchestrated journey for the customer.
I think that's absolutely, that's for me personally, I think that's absolutely bang on, because I think that, so something that I've been thinking about for the last kind of few months, if not longer, is this. So we have this idea about there's a landscape of service or a landscape of experience, as it were. And it starts with, preemptive and proactive and self-service, and then assisted, and then assisted by, and then assisted by maybe a network of experts or whatever, enabled by, like AI technology, machine learning and things. And then you hit a channel or contact point where you're actually speaking to, a human being, and they're enabled with the right sort of tools. But then if you behind them, so the front part I've just talked about is the customer side of things to enable the customer experience. But then you've got everything that sits behind that agent when they actually get to connect with a human being. I think there's a hinterland there where it's potentially a mirror of what the customer's seeing, where you can start working in the back where it goes preemptive, proactive, self-serve, and then assisted. And I think that's the emerging kind of landscape of experience, where you get these overlapping sets where you've got the customer domain and then the employee domain. And I think that's, we're way off that now in terms of the platforms and stuff, but that's where the future is.
Right. No, I'd agree with you. And there's certainly things happening that are going to help and support that. The whole idea of giving giving the customer more control over their own data as a starting point, given how important that is to define all of this. And they're giving them power over what's shared and what's not shared, what they allow an organization to know. That whole collaborative approach would be supported by that sharing of data and working together on what to take out of that to give the right experience to the customer. It's really interesting stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of like where I'm kind of like thinking about all that sort of stuff, because ultimately what you're trying to do is you're trying to enable an experience, right? Whether it's a customer or an employee, and then and to optimize it where they kind of meet, and ultimately you want to get to the point where you don't necessarily need it to meet, that things can get done that minimizes that. But when it needs to happen, when it's really important that it happens, that everything is enabled up into that kind of point. And so people can swim back and forth in those different domains. So, but I think that's just a thing that's just a very kind of future oriented. But we haven't got that integrated stack from a portfolio kind of there right now. It's probably some kind of way off.
Yeah.
But if I was to ask you, I mean, is there anything that we've missed out on the orchestration side of things that you kind of wanted to add?
I think we've given it a good run here, Adrian, for sure.
Cool. So here's the thing. We've talked about some really kind of like big stuff, Mark, and as well as I do that some people might be going, oh my God, I'm bleeding from the ears. Kind of like, this is too much. What do I do? So I always ask people to try and boil it down to, a Confucian piece of advice in many ways. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So if I was to say to you, somebody listening to this or reading the highlights and they want to improve their service and the experience they deliver to their customers, I mean, what would be your best advice? What's the first step they should take?
Use their data. I think a lot of people are kind of scared or intimidated that there's so much data and it's going to be difficult, and every organization we speak to thinks their data's in a mess and dirty, and that's just, it absolutely is, but the tools are available today to help you with that. And there's a huge amount of value in there. You've got, I think everybody's got the message that it makes a massive business impact to improve the experience you deliver. Well, it really starts with understanding what the customers are up to, what they're looking for, and then you can start to put things in place. And they can be really simple little things to get going and improve things that wind customers up, and things that frustrate them and get them stuck. And so this sort of analysis approach of using the data you've got, overlaying the voice of customer on that to spot the hot spots of problems, will give you a first set of initiatives to go improve things.
Cool. Well, thanks for that, Mark. That's great advice. So before we end, I have been doing this for crumbs the last kind of 18 months. I kind of asking a couple of questions related to the Punk CX book that I published back in the summer of 2019,
right,
which has kind of like kind of touched on a nerve over 2020 over the course of this kind of pandemic, which is glorious, and I'm thankful and grateful for that in huge amounts. But what I've been doing is I've been asking kind of people a couple of just sort of word association questions to try and gauge their perspective on what Punk CX would mean for them. And so the first question is, what one or two words would you use to describe a more Punk approach to customer experience?
Radical.
Were you a punk, by the way?
No, rocker.
Oh,
definitely a rocker. Sorry.
That's all right.
Denim jacket covered in patches.
No, Never mind.
Yeah. So yeah, you punks were radicals, right? We were we were kind of mellow old school guys, us rockers.
So what I mean, imagine you were a punk for a second. What one word would you use to describe a more punk approach to CX? Radical, would that be the one?
Radical. This might sound crazy as a rocker, but loud.
Love it. Turn it up. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And what company or brand do you think epitomizes that sort of more punk CX ethos?
Well, you tipped me off. You were going to ask this question, and I actually have a couple of examples of things, and one of them very, very sort of driven by the pandemic. I got two daughters, both studying down in New York, and so over this year, they've been fortunate they could still study down there, and so we've been doing a few trips. And in a year of going nowhere, these have been kind of special trips. Being able to go to New York, dropping them off, picking them up, and also again because of the pandemic, doing that, driving there to do that. And so, and we'd nearly always stay in the same hotel, and it's just been amazing watching that hotel develop over the last year, and develop to a point where they've really nailed a fully automated, minimal contact, digitally enabled process of booking, checking in at the hotel. And I've loved the whole experience. And what's been interesting to me is seeing it develop. They were kind of terrible. When we first went, I guess it's probably April time, it was all about what seemed pointless stuff. Like they were handing out thimbles, little rubber thimbles, that sewers would use, to allow you, color coded, but to allow you to press the button in the elevator without using your finger.
That's cool.
Right, things like that. But now they've just totally reinvented their whole process of reservation, check-in, check-out, and everything. So you don't have to interact with people. They're protecting their own people kind of behind screens. They're making it super simple and easy. And it's been great. And so we've been going back there and, supporting that. But the other example.
What was the name of the hotel? Sorry?
It's the Standard. It's the Standard in New York. Actually, the East Village Standard, I think it's called. And they just, which is not a huge chain, although they do have hotels dotted around the world. I think there's one in London. And they're cool. They're definitely a punk brand, I would say. Nice. Adrian, they're that kind of, I don't know, their name's always written upside down, for example. I mean, that's pretty punk. Right?
Yeah, we love a bit of typography.
And then the other one that I think has been doing a fantastic job, relatively new to us. We just recently bought some furniture, again, pandemic driven, you sit at home and you buy furniture and stuff like that. From a great business here in the States called Floyd, who are Detroit based, all built in America, manufactured in America, kind of contemporary furniture. But the branded service that they've kind of delivered, from the whole process of kind of ordering online, and then the communications that have come, web, text, phone, even paper. I mean, the beautiful stuff that arrived with the furniture, hand signed certificates, stamp. It's all this. They've really connected everything, but they've got it with this great brand all the way through that is sort of projecting solid, together kind of business. But the way they handed off between their operation and the delivery company's operation, and communicated about it to let us know exactly when things were going to come, and it was this day at this time. And then Floyd themselves picked back up immediately with a follow-on kind of survey of whether we were happy, and the follow-up, and then they clearly have figured out that entire journey and guided us through it in a seamless, branded way that I thought was really cool.
Nice. I love it. Like two smaller brands that are kind of definitely worth kind of like checking out. So,
Yeah. Yep.
Mark, thank you for that. I mean, that's a bit of fun to end these kind of interviews.
Yep.
But thank you so much for sharing your insight on journey orchestration and sort of the different stages, the mapping, the analytics, the orchestration, and kind of where things we're going from here, and also some of the stories that you shared. I mean, that's been super cool. It's been too long since you were last on. Let's not try and make it as long next time. But just thank you so much for sharing your time and your experience with us today. That's been ace.
Great. No, thank you, Adrian. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for all that you do, supporting and evangelizing this whole theme out there in the market. It's great stuff.
Thank you, man. Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.